We continue with our focus on the so-called construction mafia delaying the building of infrastructure in South Africa. And these highly organized criminals have led construction firms to give up on projects and even close shop. And to take the conversation further, we have Chris Campbell, CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa. Chris, thanks so much for your time. I just quickly want to look at the legislation framework that maybe you can shed a light on, particularly the preferential procurement policy framework, the 30% that should be allocated to locals, if this could potentially create an appetite or expectation from criminals in demanding that portion of the project be given to them.
Good morning and good morning to your listeners. Thank you for the opportunity. And my comment would simply be that the Preferential Procurement Framework Act, the 2017 version, that was never intended to be abused for these nefarious purposes. The intentions were always good. Some may argue differently, but we do come from a legacy which we're trying to work away. Unfortunately, I think the shortcoming is an insufficient information and education of the public to start off with on what exactly that meant, because it was grossly misinterpreted as a given and thou shalt, whereas the Act distinctly said where possible. And the idea was to subcontract work to local companies in those specific businesses in construction. There are a lot of artisans unemployed in these local environments. And then, of course, communities, look at employment opportunities. Unfortunately, with that lack of information and education around the intention and how it should be applied properly, it was then abused by, let's start off with opportunists who had no intention of seeing the community's benefit. They may argue that, but, I think there was always community consultation forums in the construction industry as far back as, I'm guessing, the early 2000s, late 90s. And if those, the expectations of communities were not met, the client bodies in the public sector and their appointed contractors had a duty to, and they had a process where there was that consultation and an understanding. Now, has that system come apart?
So, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to maybe give examples. There was quite a healthy uptake when shopping centres were being built in underprivileged or under-resourced communities, in townships in particular, that would bring the convenience and quality of a shopping experience to, everybody, or ordinary South Africans. I don't like using that term, but what had then subsequently happened is that communities will only see the erection of the building and, tenants and shops being occupied without being aware of the opportunity. And maybe that's where the frustrations would stem from. But these are not the community forums that we're talking about. These are the cartels, the criminals that come there with automatic rifles to threaten construction companies. And we are told that there's 682 cases that are currently being investigated. In your experience, do we have a profile? Who are these syndicates? Where, how far is their reach internationally and their muscle?
So it would be very difficult to comment on that. I know in the GTOC, the Global Transnational Initiative report, they do point in that direction. I think one of the problems we have in this country is we glamorize and give titles, fancy titles to all of these ill-meaning people who, manage to organize themselves. Has it got a broader reach beyond South Africa? I unfortunately cannot comment. But certainly there's a level of organization locally which has disrupted the construction industry. I mean, we're talking about several billions of rands since 2019. We're talking about 63 billion rands worth of projects across about 183 infrastructure projects. Now, those are just the projects underway. We don't know what the number is of the projects that are being held back, both by private sector investments as well. Now, you talk about the community seeing these shopping centers coming up, so forth. The issues there were likely, probably related and would better have been solved if communities had seen this and as a local communities, not people from outside of the communities approach those entities and you raise a concern and certainly your concern would have been taken, but certainly not to the extent that you get a percentage of the construction fee or costs without doing a stitch of work. That just cannot be right. Then that's plain down extortion. So unfortunately, the community needs have been abused by those who had no good intentions for the community. It's essentially self-serving.
All right, Chris, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Chris Campbell, CEO at the Consulting Engineer South Africa. Thanks indeed for your time, Chris, saying that, there are processes and without leaving anyone behind, you have to follow the procedure and engage in a dialogue as opposed to the extortion and other nefarious activities that we have been reporting on. That's Chris Campbell there giving us his perspective.